In a small bank in the heart of America, a mocking voice rang out. "No one has time to listen to an old woman's complaints." The crowd fell silent, but a young man with sharp eyes and a straight posture stepped forward. Just 30 seconds later, the authoritative footsteps of a 4-star general, clad in resplendent uniform, echoed through the hall, rendering everyone motionless. What could have happened? For a stranger to dare challenge the entire system on behalf of a forgotten widow? How did one silent act of courage compel a whole bank to bow their heads in apology? This is the story of Jake Sullivan, a 32-year-old veteran, and the moment he altered the fate of a woman and his own. Join us as we explore this emotional journey where quiet bravery confronts indifference and an ordinary man transforms into a symbol of justice. Subscribe to our channel now. Discover even more gripping and heartfelt stories. Don't miss a single moment of inspiration. Jake Sullivan gently adjusted the worn baseball cap on his head. He took a light breath, readying himself for the solemn atmosphere inside Liberty Bank on a Thursday morning. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows. It painted shimmering patterns on the marble floor. At 32 years old, 6 months after an honorable discharge from the famed 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, renowned for some of the fiercest campaigns in the Middle East, Jake had chosen a simple yet fulfilling life. Plumber. He loved the straightforwardness of it. He relished the way his hands could restore order to a tangle of pipes and stubborn leaks. Each time he turned a valve or replaced a gasket, he felt as though he were rebuilding a small world, no different from restoring and defending his comrades under fire. But the past never truly leaves. Like the winding corridor that led to today's customer service counter, memories of his father, a staff sergeant who died when Jake was only 8, clung to his mind. He recalled his young widow mother, her hair frosted with grief, forced to endure the disdainful, indifferent glances of bureaucrats as she sought military benefits. He remembered her quiet tears by the window, the crumpled paperwork she wrestled with for days on end. He could still smell the ink on those forms. He could feel the helplessness rising in his throat as he watched her stoop in her wheelchair, her tank nearly empty of gas. Today, he wasn't here for anything momentous, just to pay rent, a habit he preferred to handling via bank transfer. He believed face-to-face meetings carried a transparency that a screen couldn't match, even when exchanging modest paychecks by check. The line was neat, the air hushed, broken only by the scrape of plastic chairs and the soft background music. Jake's eyes swept the queue. He noted stooped figures, others poring over documents, an elderly couple holding hands. Then he paused at the customer service window. An older woman stood, straightening her file. She must have been in her late 70s, her silver hair pinned at the nape, wisps brushing her ears. A thin, pale blue sweater draped over her bony shoulders. Her hand trembled as she pushed her papers beneath the glass partition. A chill ran through Jake's chest. He didn't need the sign reading, "Priority, Seniors and Military," to know why he'd stepped forward. His stride was measured, not the urgency of fixing a burst pipe. He knelt to a height that spared her from craning her neck. His voice was warm. "Ma'am, do you need any help?" She hesitated. Her eyes flicked up to his. Deep wrinkles marked her face, yet her eyes shone with quiet resolve. She shook her head, voice breaking. I just want to withdraw my savings. I need money for a funeral." Her words cracked on the last phrase, as if her pain had been struck. Jake nodded. He gently took her withdrawal form and smiled kindly. "I'll wait for you." Without another word, he stepped back, creating space for her. The simple gesture spoke volumes. It gave her the respect she likely hadn't felt in years. When she slid the paper through the slot, the computer clicked. The teller leaned forward beneath her mask. "One moment, please." They rifled through the ledger, murmuring, "Is she cashing it all out? That's a large amount." The screen displayed account holder Mrs. Mary Sullivan, identical to his mother's name, the widow of a staff sergeant. Jake listened to every sound. His heart pounded. The past flashed before him, hours spent with his mother navigating endless procedures for benefits. He remembered her queuing for hours, hands shaking, holding back tears so as not to invite pity. The memory knotted his throat. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the frail woman at the counter. No one else noticed him. A man in faded jeans, a plain tee, a battered cap. Yet the aura of an unsung hero transformed the space. No chatter, no chaos, only the click of keys, hushed whispers, and the soft breath of the elderly. She trembled as the final bills were placed in the envelope, her arms wrapped around it. Then came a sigh, not from her, but from the man behind her. His grip tightened on his briefcase. His eyes glistened. He was a generation older, salt and pepper hair, yet still imposing. A chance connection that made Jake frown. When he stepped to the counter, his tone was grave. "I want to withdraw everything." But the teller shook her head. "Sorry, sir, you've exceeded this month's transaction limit." His expression darkened. Anger flared, as though to shatter the glass barrier. Jake saw the woman's unease. He feared this bully would echo the disrespect his mother once endured. He placed a steady hand on Mrs. Sullivan's shoulder. "Mrs. Mary, have you been waiting long?" Startled, she turned. Surprise softened into relief when she met his gaze. "No, dear, only a minute." Her voice trembled with emotion. Jake addressed the teller. "Please give her priority. I'll wait until it's done." The teller nodded, offered a small smile. "Yes, sir. Please go ahead, ma'am." In that instant, silence fell, an unusual hush, as if the entire bank watched. Mrs. Sullivan gathered her money. She glanced at Jake. "Thank you for caring." Jake bowed his head. "I'm just doing what's right." At that moment, the gray-haired man tried to push past. He pressed his lips together. "This doesn't concern you." But Jake replied calmly, "Sir, don't forget, this is a place that respects seniors and service members." His tone wasn't loud, but his firmness quieted the bully. Mother and son emerged arm in arm. Jake followed to ensure their safety. As they passed the doorway, they turned and waved softly. "Bless you, young man." Jake nodded, his eyes gentle. "Wishing you both good health." Outside, he leaned against the brick wall and drew a deep breath. Spring light suffused the air. The scent of blooming jasmine drifted by. In that moment, he understood why he'd come. Not to relive the past, but to continue fighting for dignity, just as his father had taught him long ago. Word spread swiftly on social media of the plumber general. Photos of him with the widow at Liberty Bank circulated, captioned, "One small act, one voice for justice." Many old comrades messaged, surprised by his compassion in everyday life. But to Jake, the attention was fleeting. He removed his cap, ruffled his hair, then bowed before the bank's entrance, hands clasped behind his back. He turned and walked away, leaving behind the silhouette of a veteran who'd found a new battlefield, not with guns, but with care and respect for society's most vulnerable. And so, a seemingly ordinary American morning imprinted an extraordinary moment where silent bravery could shatter prejudice and restore hope to broken spirits. Jake Sullivan, with his worn baseball cap and plumber's hands, affirmed a simple yet immortal truth. Justice begins with understanding and compassion. Jake Sullivan leaned forward. The morning light filtered through the Liberty Bank's windows, casting a calm reflection across his face. The red brick wall behind the customer service desk mirrored his silhouette, fragile as a thread, yet heavy with resolve. At 32, a veteran of the 101st Airborne Division, he had endured brutal battles. He understood the value of patience and perseverance. Today, those qualities were tested in an entirely different arena, a small American bank where a widow faced rigid administrative procedures. Before him stood Emily, a young customer service representative, visibly frustrated as she explained for the third time the transaction fee. Her throat was hoarse from repetition. "Ma'am, I've already explained 3 times. The system shows no error. This fee is in accordance with policy." The words 3 times landed like an invisible blow, extinguishing the last spark of hope in the woman's eyes. Mrs. Margaret Thompson, her silver hair brushing her collar, nodded slowly. Clutching her worn file, her voice remained soft yet resolute. "This letter says otherwise. My husband's military pension is exempt from fees." The word exempt rang out sharply, causing Emily to hesitate, glancing at the document with rare uncertainty. But in the next instant, she bowed her head. "Our system does not indicate any special status. I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do." Murmurs rippled through the bank lobby. Some customers closed their books, lowered their gaze to their phones. An awkward tension filled the air. A few pursed their lips. Others sighed as though unfamiliar with waiting in line. The crowd drifted apart, whispering among themselves before returning to their own affairs. Yet Margaret stood her ground, shoulders slightly hunched but unbowed. The lines at the corners of her eyes seemed to soften in exhaustion, not defeat. Jake's brows furrowed. The image of his own mother, a war widow, flashed vividly in his mind. He recalled the days she combed through paperwork, waited hours in benefit offices, only to be told, "improper form," or "insufficient information." How many tears had she shed over the indifference of those who failed to grasp the meaning of service? Without hesitation, Jake stepped out of line. His boots echoed on the marble floor. The bank fell silent. All eyes turned to him. In the midst of the hush, his steps sounded like a warning. Something unexpected was about to unfold. He approached the counter, a faint but genuine smile on his lips. His strong hands rested gently on Mrs. Thompson's shoulder, imparting a comforting warmth. Emily stepped back, astonished. Her professional attire and neat bun could not conceal her embarrassment. Jake spoke softly, loud enough for both Emily and Margaret to hear. "Excuse me, Emily. This lady deserves respect. I will wait until her issue is resolved." He was neither angry nor resentful. His tone was calm, yet firm. In that moment, all other sounds faded. The printer's whir, the customer's whispers, the tapping of keyboards receded. Only the quiet presence of the general-turned-plumber, demanding justice for a widow, remained. Emily's mouth fell open. She hastily straightened up, forcing a polite smile. "Sir, this does not concern you. Please return to the line." But Jake held her gaze unwaveringly. "I understand the rules. I also know there are exceptional cases that deserve review. Please tell me what additional procedures are needed to ensure Mrs. Thompson is not charged this unjust fee." Tension crackled like a tightened string. The surrounding patrons leaned in. Emily took a deep breath, striving for composure. "If you wish, I can confirm with the manager." Please have a seat in the waiting area. She typed quickly, her expression focused. Jake nodded with a smile. He pulled out a nearby chair and guided Mrs. Thompson to sit. She looked at him, tears welling in her eyes, as though she no longer felt alone in this indifferent crowd. He leaned close and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll support you all the way." Margaret responded with a slight nod. Her once dry features softened with gratitude. Time moved slowly. Emily disappeared behind the glass partition, then returned with a well-dressed man, the branch manager. He stepped forward, his tone more serious. "I'm Mr. Parker, the bank manager. I apologize for the inconvenience. We will review Mrs. Thompson's file again." He turned to Jake, hands clasped respectfully. "Thank you for your patience." Jake replied quietly, "Please ensure she is not charged an unwarranted fee." Mr. Parker nodded, posed a few questions to Margaret and Emily, then motioned for them to move the file into a private office. In that waiting moment, Margaret gazed into space. Memories fluttered through her mind. She recalled the village priest advising her to let go of financial matters for peace of mind, but clearly she could not. This wasn't merely a bank fee. It was a matter of honoring her late husband's dignity. She remembered his final words, "You must preserve your name as I did on the battlefield." The private office revealed the answer. The fee had been applied in error. The system failed to recognize her military pension's exempt status. Mr. Parker bowed his head in apology. He offered to refund every cent and update her exemption code across her account. Margaret signed shakily. Tears glistened as she swiped her pen. Emily stood silently, apologizing again, then handed over her corrected paperwork. When they re-emerged into the main hall, Jake offered his hand to help Mrs. Thompson rise. All eyes fell upon them, but this time with admiration and respect. Mrs. Thompson managed a gentle smile. She whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." Jake simply nodded, bowed to her and Emily, then stepped back to let them pass. Outside, the afternoon air carried the scent of spring blooms. Jake leaned against the bank's exterior wall and closed his eyes, savoring the peaceful moment. A quiet excitement spread through him. He had done what needed to be done, as his father taught him, fulfilling the duty of a hero in everyday life. News of the Liberty Bank incident spread quickly on social media. Images of Jake in his humble uniform, standing patiently beside the widow at the service desk, circulated under the caption, "Silent Bravery in Daily Life." Many were moved to share and comment. Some fellow veterans sent congratulatory messages, proud of his compassionate stand. But to Jake, the spotlight was fleeting. He removed his baseball cap, tousled his hair, and walked away down the empty street. Far behind him, the bank's bell chimed steadily, a reminder that justice always needs a voice, however small, carried by responsibility and humanity. And in that moment, in the heart of America, a veteran proved. True courage is not found only on battlefields, but in standing up for the most vulnerable among us. Jake Sullivan stood resolute beside Margaret Thompson. His stance was as steadfast as a pillar in the hushed bank hall. Fluorescent lights overhead cast sharp highlights across his determined features, dark circles under his eyes, yet a steely gaze, broad shoulders unmoved by the tension. For a moment, he swept his eyes across the seating area, where customers whispered and exchanged curious, or sometimes disdainful glances. Some eyes softened in admiration, admiring the quiet courage of a warrior turned civilian, now fiercely defending a widow's rights. Others knitted their brows in irritation. This serious interruption was too much. His shoes tapped lightly on the marble floor as a security guard approached, anxious. Is there a problem, sir? Jake turned, offering a gentle smile, unhurried, his voice calm. Nothing unusual. I'm simply standing here until she receives fair treatment. The bank seemed to hold its breath. The whir of ceiling fans, the clack of keyboards at the teller stations, even the automatic transaction bell, all receded so every eye could rest on him. Silence deep enough to hear each disgruntled sigh, each rustle of paper, the faint commotion beyond the glass as Emily flipped through her ledger. Margaret glanced his way. Gratitude bloomed across her worn features. In that instant, her wrinkles seemed decades deeper, bearing the weight of years of hardship. Her voice, soft, with a southern lilt, yet resolute, spoke. Thank you, son. You needn't have done this. She extended a trembling but resolute hand. I'm Margaret Thompson, widow of Colonel Robert Thompson, 82nd Airborne Division. He fell in Afghanistan 14 years ago. Jake took her frail hand. He felt the thinness of her skin, freckles like time's own etchings. He replied with military courtesy. Jake Sullivan, veteran of the 101st Airborne Division. That brief handshake carried unspoken understanding. Two paratroopers, once facing bombs together, now standing united in civilian life. Suddenly, Emily's weary voice cut in. Ma'am, our system is final. Any changes must go through the Veterans Affairs Office, not us. The rigid bureaucracy rose between customer and staff like an invisible wall. Before she could finish, the manager's office door cracked open. A well-dressed, middle-aged man emerged, stern-eyed at the scene. He asked Emily, "What's happening here?" But before she could answer, a young man from the back piped up, his tone mocking, loud enough for all to hear. "He's playing hero for an old lady. Some of us have work to do." A few customers nodded in agreement, checked their watches, sighed with impatience. Whispered complaints swelled. "He's holding up the line." "What's all the fuss about?" "These old folks, making noise." Yet in that chaotic moment, Jake remained perfectly calm. Neither anger nor frustration flickered across his face. He simply offered a patient smile to the rude youth. Then he strode to the counter and met the manager's gaze directly. Veins stood out on his forearms beneath his rolled-up sleeves. He bowed his head respectfully. "Sir, I only ask that Mrs. Margaret receive the fair treatment her policy merits." The manager, taken aback, furrowed his brow. He flipped through his notebook, scanned a few pages of Margaret's file. His eyes brightened when he saw her name and fee exemption request. "This is Mrs. Thompson's file. The system initially failed to recognize her exempt status, but this documentation clearly..." Emily stepped forward with the exemption letter. He hesitated, glancing between the letter, his screen, and Margaret. The bank fell silent once more. Patrons murmured. Even the previously critical young man fell silent, his indignation dissolving in an instant. Finally, the manager nodded slowly. "Mrs. Thompson, I apologize. The fee will be refunded and updated in our system. You may proceed with your transaction." His tone was formal, as though granting a favor to a dignitary. Immediately, Emily entered the command. The click of her mouse sounded decisive. Margaret exhaled softly. Tears glistened in her eyes. She looked at Jake, then at the manager. "Thank you, sir." Her gratitude carried the weight of years waiting for understanding. Jake smiled and offered a slight military bow, ingrained discipline shining through. "It was my pleasure to help you." He then stepped aside, allowing Margaret to approach the teller. As she placed her letter and documents down, the bank staff worked swiftly, their eyes now filled with respect. The transaction completed, The envelope of cash was handed to Margaret. She clutched it to her chest, a serene smile on her lips. The sense of respect and fairness seemed to warm her weary soul after countless trials. The final customers were served. The bank returned to normal, but Jake Sullivan's presence lingered in many minds. Outside, spring sunlight bathed the sidewalk. Their elongated shadows stretched across the pavement. Margaret offered a soft nod. "Take care, young man," Jake replied. "Wishing you a good day." In the bustling city, a veteran and a war widow had connected through a moment of humanity, reminding us that true justice and compassion know no age, class, or status. They are simply the essence of human dignity. In the tense hush that gripped Liberty Bank's lobby, the flickering fluorescent lights overhead only sharpened the resolve etched into Jake Sullivan's face. Mr. Richard Hayes brushed the lapel of his crisp suit. He turned to Jake, his voice low but firm. "Sir, I understand your concern, but we have procedures. Mrs. Thompson may schedule an appointment to discuss this later." All eyes locked on to the two of them as if they were soldiers facing off at dawn. Suddenly, the bank felt stifling. Jake's brow knit. He ground his teeth softly, yet his voice remained eerily calm. "Sir, this isn't about procedure. It's about doing what's right for someone who sacrificed for her country." The words, "what's right," echoed through the air. They struck at the conscience of every onlooker. Silence fell, broken only by the pulse beating in the chests of waiting customers. Mrs. Margaret Thompson, her silver hair dusted with age as witness to decades of hardship, reached into her small purse. Her hands trembled, yet held firm as she withdrew a metal card. Wordlessly, she placed it in Jake's hand. A Bravo Company 82nd Airborne Division badge with tiny gleaming ribbons that spoke volumes. It bore witness to a family's blood sacrifice for freedom. She whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's all right, son. I'm used to this." In that moment, everyone in the bank understood that Margaret was no ordinary customer, and this was more than a mere transaction fee dispute. The restless crowd fell silent. Their initial skepticism softened into empathy. Jake inhaled deeply. He turned to face Mr. Hayes one last time. "Sir, I will not leave until her matter is resolved." Mr. Hayes's face flushed. A cold sweat beaded on his brow. His voice faltered under the unspoken weight of the silent warrior's stance. "If you're using your veteran status to cause a scene, I will have both of you removed." The threat held no sway over Jake. He replied evenly, with no rush. "Arrest me? Bank ejects war widow over fee dispute. Is that the headline you want?" Again, silence engulfed the room. Sighs mingled with visions of sensational headlines. Then, the rear doors burst open with force. A small alarm bell jingled, enough to freeze the bank in suspended astonishment. Customers whipped around, eyes wide as if witnessing a surreal dream. Into the hall strode a towering U.S. Army general, about 60 years old, his dress uniform adorned with gleaming ribbons. Behind him marched 4 officers in immaculate attire, posture rigid, their eyes ablaze with purpose. Their entrance echoed like a second alarm, but this time, it heralded protection of justice. Every gaze turned to the general. The manager stood stunned. Emily trembled behind the counter. Margaret froze, and Jake pressed his lips together, his eyes shining with hope. The soft rustle of paper against the general's pocket carried an unspoken message. This was no longer a private stand against policy. It was a gathering of collective respect for those who serve. The general raised his hand in a crisp salute. His voice rang out with clear authority. "I am Colonel Benjamin Carter of the 101st Airborne Division. I am here to defend the rights of my comrade's widow." His tone conveyed innate power and command, as natural as the uniform he wore. The bank seemed to awaken. Murmurs vanished, replaced by solemn attention. Mr. Hayes exhaled heavily and stepped back. His eyes flicked from Colonel Carter to Mrs. Thompson, then settled on Jake. "Colonel, please, go ahead." Urgency marked his features. Margaret glanced at Jake, tears glinting, as if the general's arrival had erased years of sorrow. She closed her eyes momentarily. She seemed to glimpse her late husband standing behind the colonel, smiling in pride at his widow and comrade continuing the fight for justice. Colonel Carter advanced, voice unwavering. "The fee exemption policy for military pensions is in force. Any charge reflects a system error. Liberty Bank is responsible for immediate reimbursement. I expect this matter resolved here and now, before I report to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Department of Veterans Affairs." Each word carried an undeniable weight. Instantly, Emily and Mr. Hayes hurriedly accessed the files. Data flickered across the screen. The bank's machinery moved with newfound agility under the colonel's presence. Within seconds, the printer spat out a receipt reading, "Transaction fee refunded, permanent exemption applied." Mrs. Thompson accepted the document. Her smile radiated profound relief. Patrons offered quiet applause. Some waved congratulations. The gentle clapping swelled, not in chaos, but like a dignified drumbeat marking a simple yet significant ceremony. Mrs. Thompson turned to Jake, eyes bright. "Thank you, and thank you, Colonel." Her voice was soft but resonant, filling the space. Jake returned a modest smile and saluted the colonel, then turned to Mrs. Thompson. "I'm honored to help you." He brushed away sweat from his brow. Warmth spread through his chest. As the general and his officers exited, the bank's bell chimed once more, not as an alarm, but as a farewell to morning's light, now yielding to late afternoon. Golden rays streamed through the glass, casting long silhouettes of two figures, a war widow and a veteran, together in a silent symphony of solidarity, honoring quiet courage in everyday life. And as the iron doors closed, the image of Jake Sullivan, the Bravo Company badge, and Margaret Thompson, widow of an 82nd Airborne colonel, was forever etched in memory. They reminded all that justice is more than pen and paper. It is the courage to speak up, the simple acts that can transform an entire system, a priceless lesson for every American. In an instant, the solemn air of Liberty Bank's lobby seemed to collapse, as if every prior murmur had vanished, giving way to a surge of profound intensity. The fluorescent lights overhead wavered as the double doors swung open. A chill breeze swept through the warm spring morning. From the threshold stepped General William Bradley, commander of the Regional Military Command, resplendent in his dress uniform. His shoulders bore the insignia of a general. His chest glittered with ribbons. His bearing was commanding yet composed, compelling every witness to bow in respect. In that moment, General Bradley's rich voice resonated. "Mrs. Thompson, we have been searching for you." Every gaze in the bank turned to the widow standing quietly beside Jake Sullivan. All concern over bank procedures, all previous whispers dissolved, leaving a reverent stillness to honor the weight of, "We have been searching for you." Margaret Thompson froze. Her eyes widened in stunned recognition as she uttered the name she had believed lost to memory. "General Bradley?" General Bradley smiled and stepped forward. He embraced Margaret gently, with the profound reverence shared only among comrades who have weathered battle together. His eyes softened as he took in her weathered face, the lines of time etched by days spent waiting for news from the front. He drew back a step, voice warm but tinged with regret. "I'm sorry I'm late. The traffic was worse than expected." Bathed in the mellow afternoon light, Margaret's face glowed with relief and joy. She nodded and gently patted the general's shoulder. Rarely had she heard such a heartfelt apology, rooted not in formality, but in enduring camaraderie. At the precise moment General Bradley held Margaret, Mr. Richard Hayes, Liberty Bank's branch manager, hurried forward. He clasped his hands over his chest in a flurry of nerves. "General Bradley, it's an honor. I'm Richard Hayes, branch manager. How may Liberty Bank assist you?" He spoke rapidly, as though a single second's delay might cost him the privilege of serving such a distinguished officer. His face betrayed discomfort under General Bradley's cool appraisal, eyes sweeping over the manager's tailored suit, pausing on the medals pinned to his chest, before returning to Richard with a gaze of unspoken authority. General Bradley brushed the inquiry aside. His tone was measured but uncompromising. "I have come to escort Mrs. Thompson to the memorial dedication. However, it appears there remains a matter to resolve first." In the hushed bank lobby, his words rang like the opening notes of a solemn ceremony, not only for Margaret, but for all who sacrificed their lives for the country. The memorial's unveiling was to honor fallen comrades, including Margaret's late husband, Colonel Robert Thompson. Margaret shook her head gently, offering a warm smile. She motioned to Jake, inviting him to step closer. "It's only a small issue with Robert's pension account." Her southern drawl carried warmth, though her shoulders bore the weight of years without her husband. She looked at Jake with eyes brimming gratitude. "This young man has been so kind to stand by me." Jake Sullivan, veteran of the 101st Airborne Division, held himself erect. His gaze was gentle yet resolute. He stepped forward, voice steady as when he once drilled his unit in camp. "Jake Sullivan, sir, veteran of the 101st Airborne Division." Each word rang clearly, preserving the moment's dignity. The entire bank fell silent, honoring the reunion of soldiers. General Bradley advanced gravely. He grasped Jake's hand firmly. The grip conveyed both pride and affirmation that Jake's actions today honored not only a widow, but the collective dignity of all who wore the uniform. The general met Jake's eyes, emotion shining through. "Thank you for caring for Mrs. Thompson. She means a great deal to us." That was more than thanks. It was a brotherly pledge. Even after discharge, paratroopers stand by each other in life's everyday battles. The waiting customers, witnessing this scene, showed their respect. Some bowed their heads, others offered gentle applause. Emily, the same clerk who had stood rigid moments before, shrunk back at the counter, her face reflecting remorse and newfound admiration. Every dispute over fees, every rigid procedure, faded beneath the power of solidarity and human dignity. Then Mr. Hayes, still flustered, interjected, "Colonel, if there are any documents to update, we stand ready to assist immediately." General Bradley inclined his head, then addressed Emily. "Please cancel the incorrect charge and refund Mrs. Thompson at once. Update her account with permanent exemption status." His voice, low yet unmistakable, carried the weight of an order. Emily's fingers flew over the keyboard. Her expression was urgent and repentant. Moments later, the printer clicked "Talk" and produced a confirmation slip. Margaret accepted it, her trembling hands clutching the paper as if holding restored trust. She turned and bowed to General Bradley, then met Jake's eyes once more. "Thank you, Jake Sullivan. You did what was right." General Bradley patted Jake's shoulder, his stern features softening, proud as a captain commending a well-executed mission. "You did well, brother-in-arms." Then he turned to Margaret, voice warm. "Mrs. Thompson, shall we proceed to the dedication ceremony?" She nodded, her eyes shining with pride and joy. Together they left through the bank doors, bathed in the late-day sun. Their shadows stretched long across the sidewalk, weaving a bridge between battlefield and civilian life. In the distance, the memorial stood tall in the park, soon to be dedicated to silent sacrifices. Jake leaned against the bank wall, watching as General Bradley escorted Margaret away. In his heart, he felt certain that justice and compassion endure, even amid the driest of bureaucratic rites. And when the story spread across social media, Americans everywhere felt the warmth of soldiers' deeds, not only on the battlefield, but in life's ordinary moments charged with quiet heroism. In the heart of America, a general arrived just in time. A widow was given protection, and a veteran unafraid to stand up to the institution. Together they wove a silent anthem of heroism, one that will echo on forever. The echo of General William Bradley's combat boots rang across the polished marble floor, a deep, resonant note amid Liberty Bank's usual cacophony of printer beeps and whispered transactions. Under the fluorescent lights, his immaculate uniform exuded authority. Every stitch and ribbon caught the glow of his medals. While branch manager Richard Hayes stood awkwardly forcing a smile, General Bradley turned, his expression stern, his voice suddenly as cold and commanding as when he oversaw operations in Kabul. "Let me be clear," he intoned, his voice a rolling thunder in the hushed hall. Every eye in the bank fixed upon him. Procedure and policy faded into irrelevance. Margaret Thompson is no ordinary military widow. For 35 years, she stood shoulder to shoulder with her husband, Colonel Robert Thompson, at bases from Texas to Alaska, from Fort Bragg to the Pacific Fleet. When he sacrificed himself to save his comrades in Kabul, she did not collapse. Instead, she carried on, volunteering over 12,000 hours at veterans' hospitals nationwide, caring for soldiers returned with wounds seen and unseen. Silence rippled outward from the general, sweeping away every stray sound. An officer at his side bowed his head and offered a thick dossier. General Bradley took it, flicked through a few pages, then fixed Hayes with an unwavering gaze. "Furthermore," he continued, his tone unyielding, "this account pertains to a special pension benefit for families of Medal of Honor recipients, the highest U.S. military decoration awarded posthumously to Colonel Thompson. That benefit was established by the Secretary of Defense to honor and repay that ultimate sacrifice." Hayes went pale. His grip on the documents slackened. In that moment, every shred of his confidence drained away. Facing the general, whose few words carried the weight of orders, he lowered his gaze, at a loss for any further rebuttal. The bank's lights seemed to blur, leaving only General Bradley's solemn visage seared into memory. "Mrs. Thompson," the general's voice softened, shedding its earlier frost. "We never speak of your service as a privilege. Your lawful benefits were denied without cause. That is unacceptable." He raised a hand, his tone signaling a powerful audit. "I hereby order a full review of how this bank handles veterans' accounts. No widow shall suffer such injustice again." The waiting customers held their breath. They exchanged glances, then nodded in silent approval. Emily, the once rigid teller, stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Sir, we will begin immediately." Her voice trembled, fearful of troubling the general. General Bradley merely inclined his head in acknowledgement, then turned to Margaret with deep respect in his eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience you've endured today." Margaret bowed her head. A single tear slid down her weathered cheek, like dew on a spring morning. Words were unnecessary. Memories of her husband, days spent tending wounded veterans, the wail of hospital sirens, the grasp of trembling hands, All filled the hush with unspoken emotion. Once the paperwork was complete, Emily handed Mrs. Thompson a slip confirming the refund and permanent exemption. She clasped the paper tightly and whispered, "Thank you, General Bradley." Then she turned to Jake Sullivan, standing quietly at her side, and added, "Thank you for seeing me." Her voice wavered with gratitude as she pressed her trembling hand into his, finding in him a steadfast anchor amid life's storms. Jake gripped her hand firmly, emotion shining in his eyes. "It is my honor, ma'am." Though he had faced countless battles, his heart trembled at the genuine understanding shown to a widow of war. In that moment, Liberty Bank, usually a realm of numbers and rules, became hallowed ground, a sanctuary celebrating fellowship and gratitude. Before departing, General Bradley looked to Jake, his tone unexpectedly gentle. "You understand loyalty and sacrifice more than most. Please join us at the memorial dedication. There, the public will remember Mrs. Thompson, you, and all who have served in silence for our nation." The invitation was a badge of honor, affirming Jake's place among veterans and patriots alike. Outside the bank, the afternoon sun gilded the sidewalk. Margaret and Jake walked slowly into the golden light, their shadows stretching on dew-kissed pavement. She gazed skyward at the broad expanse above, clouds gathering like heralds of a new dawn. She squeezed Jake's hand, her eyes alight with trust. "You've given me the gift of being truly seen. I no longer fight alone." Jake smiled softly, looking at her with quiet reverence. "I will always be by your side, ma'am." The bank's door chimed closed behind them. In its place rang the steady tread of boots forging ahead toward the dedication. On the distant hill, the memorial stood sentinel, a testament to those whose names are etched in stone. The evening breeze carried the "Next week, Liberty Bank will issue a formal apology to Mrs. Thompson and roll out a training program for staff on veterans' accounts." Emily, the teller who was once indifferent, reaches out to Jake, admitting her perspective has changed. "I used to think my job was just transactions. Now I understand how vital respect truly is." General Bradley has invited Jake to serve as a civilian advisor, helping veterans reintegrate into civilian life. He designs support programs, connecting multiple generations of veterans. Margaret becomes a dear friend, bringing cookies to his office, filling the emotional void in Jake's heart since his mother's passing. A photograph of them at the memorial ceremony hangs in the military headquarters, captioned, "Sometimes, standing still is standing tallest." Jake's story reminds us, courage needs no medals or spotlights. It begins with a simple choice, standing by someone when the whole world turns away. Today, ask yourself, will you be the next to stand up? Leave your thoughts and share these inspiring stories with your family and friends across America.